Mhm. I realize that it's 4th of July. Yeah. Yesterday I talked to you about Independence Day, and it looks like you've suspended the existing laws and procedures for the administering of justice. Yes. Now, since you suspended the laws, yeah, because of your conflict of interest and that you don't want me to sue you or have you prosecuted for treason, I've often said that somebody's going to have to enforce the laws. Now, you said that you could issue a dissolution of marriage without me getting any notice of court hearings. Yes. And then you said that I didn't have to have an actual copy of it. You didn't have to serve me. Yeah. And then you arrested me multiple times knowing that I didn't commit any crime. Yes. And then when I told you, yes, you refused to exonerate me of any wrongdoing. Yeah. Now, not to be confused with military law. Yeah. Well, let's say I wanted to own a cemetery. Yes. Is there a possibility that there will be less people dying over the next 70 years than the number of persons that have died in the previous 70 years? See, there's certain things that you can only do at certain ages. Final expense is one of those that you have to wait to the age of 50. And I'm always concerned about the day of my death. So I have a limited amount of time where I can be alive on planet Earth. Yes. And there's some things that are important to me that you don't think are important to you. Now, I want my sons because they're important to me. And you issued a dissolution of marriage without any jurisdiction of the law. Yes. Without any due process to myself. Yes. And then you issued protection orders based upon the lies of a prosecuting attorney and my lying wife. And then when you reissued it without any jurisdiction, yes, you decided that you wouldn't expunge my criminal record. Yes. And then you made up, well, really fictitious crimes. Yes. Where you wouldn't exonerate me. And then you keep refusing, yes, to enforce my rights and the rights of my family. Now, this martial law of Clallam County and Jefferson County, yes, where you say, well, you'll just do what I say. Yeah. I think that it's in conflict with the actual enforcement of the laws. You can't obligate people to do what you say when you're the ones violating the laws. You have to allow them to sue you. Yeah. And you have to allow them to have you prosecuted. Ooch. Now, when I look through the cemeteries of the United States, ooch, there's probably certain laws that say that you can only have, well, maybe 6 feet down, 2 foot by 6 foot gravesite. Yeah. hmm But maybe you can stack them up three at a time. You can go down maybe 10 feet. I mean, there's certain legal requirements for the ownership of a cemetery. Pooh. And I think there would be certain zoning requirements that if you're going to purchase a cemetery for the future burial of any individual that dies, there are conditions to be able to sell cemetery plots. And my thought is, well, I'd like to buy a cemetery today that doesn't exist. Could you get me each state of the United States and the available land to a private business owner that would like to buy a cemetery that I myself would want to be buried in since I own it? Yes. And the actual conditions to be able to sell burial sites in that cemetery. Pouch! Now, I think 1,000,000 acres is what I'm needing today. Yes. And for a lot of you that said, well, Paul bought himself a cemetery. It happens to be 1,000,000 acres. Yes. It's probably in the middle of the United States someplace in South Dakota or somewhere. Yeah. And he decided that he'd be buried alone. See, when you love somebody, you don't want to think of them as decaying, yes, rotting next to you for the next 100 years until they're back to their original condition of dirt. Yes. Now, why don't you get me the cemetery licenses, the electricity necessary? Now, if I had to put electricity on 1,000,000 acres, I'd dig a trench through the whole thing. Yeah. put my burial site in the middle of it, and just a little tombstone. Here lies Paul Budnick, buried in 1,000,000 acres. Now, do I have to water the grass around it? Or, I mean, is there certain zoning requirements to have ownership of a cemetery? Do you have to plant grass, or could I just leave it in its natural state? And any person that goes on it, it's private property. Poop! But it's 1,000,000 acres, and who's going to tell? It's not a forest, and it's not a plains. It's just 1,000,000 fucking acres.